We are here on what we call Team Sunday, every Super Bowl Sunday. And just really quick survey. We always like to do this. So how many are rooting for Taylor Swift today? Anybody? Come on. All right, nobody. Philly cheesesteaks. Anybody? Philly cheesesteaks. Hey, you know, I'm a Philly cheesesteak guy. Thank you, City of Brotherly Love, for that amazing food item. I'm a food guy. So anyway, really, this Sunday kind of represents us just pausing and taking a reflection on the past year and really looking forward into the future that God has for us as a local church. So on your seat was an annual report. You should have had one on your seat. If you need an extra copy, we have them out at the resource window. There's a digital version on our website as well. So for those of you joining us online, we're going to be kind of walking through some of the things on this today. And so if you go to our giving page, there's a digital version on there as well, mediacitychurch.com/give. So everybody should be set and ready to go this morning. But I just want to begin this morning because Team Sunday, I think, is a good reminder of this theme of team, that a team, first and foremost, works together, which I think is good for us to just kind of wrap our minds and our hearts around this morning, because I think this idea is a lot more controversial and countercultural than sometimes we give credit to. Because I think we can so easily forget the value of team in a very self-made type of culture, right? We as a society, we love individual stories. We love the tangible, singular symbols of success. It's way easier to assign credit to a solo standout than the intricate details of the system, right, so to speak. For instance, in sports, we say certain things, even in the way we talk at times. We go, you know, LeBron led his team, rather than focusing on the collective system and the coaching that made that success actually possible. This is kind of built into who we are, to really not think in team-like terms, but to take it a step further. I think a team not only works together, but a team really works together towards something, and that something is a shared vision. And so I'm a basketball guy. I decided to wear a basketball jersey this morning. A lot of people are like, what is that? Oklahoma City Thunder. Okay, everybody. I usually am rocking the Seahawks, but, you know, so it's hard to be a fan these days right now, you know. So anyway, I love anybody documentary person? Like, I love watching good documentaries. So actually, there's a new documentary CNN's doing on Kobe Bryant. So it was really fascinating. If maybe some of you watched this or caught the first few episodes. But it's interesting. In the first episode, one of my main observations was the idea of kind of Kobe as this self-made star, so to speak, and Mamba mentality, the Black Mamba. You know, he's got this whole persona. But it's really interesting in the first episode talking about him in his high school years in Pennsylvania, Lower Marion High School. It's interesting because he really caught this vision early on, which was the vision of his coach that said, we haven't won a high school championship in 53 years, and I'm here to lead us towards a vision to win championships. And hearing the Black Mamba reflect on this pivotal moment, that if it wasn't for the catalyst of something in the system, like a coach having that shared vision of going, we're going to go do this together, this whole thing would fall apart, so to speak, right? And whether we like it or not, a Mamba mentality minus the team system equals no Mamba, right? There's this interdependence that we have to admit, even in our culture of elevating a few, even in our culture of like standouts, even in our culture of individual stories. Yes, sometimes we do that, but we can't divorce it from this idea of interdependence. Dare I say, Travis Kelce minus Taylor Swift equals no Super Bowl rings. Dare I say that? Dare I say it? It's a tangible phenomenon, ladies and gentlemen. Come on. If you're denying it, you're denying reality right now. All right. So this team effort, right? The Bible. What does the Bible have to say about this shared vision? Because we're talking about the church. And so I think it's good for us to remind ourselves, what is the shared version of the church? And then really for us, how do we express that as a local church? So I always bring us back to Ephesians chapter 1, verses 22 through 23, where Paul, this early leader in the church, in this kind of circuit letter to all the churches in the region, he gives this great vision statement that describes the church. It says this. It says, God has put all things under the authority of Christ and has made him head over all things for the benefit of the church. And this is key right here. Verse 23, and the church is his body. It is made full and complete by Christ, who fills all things everywhere with himself. I like the NIV also. This is the New Living Translation, the NIV uses the language, the church is the fullness of him who fills everything in every way. There's this interdependence that God has chosen for us to function as his body, as his church. Even as Callie read out of Romans 12 this morning during our musical worship, right? That pause we took just to read out of the scripture that reminds us that we are invited into that reality. And really, Paul here is seeing the goodness of God essentially saturating everywhere, right? What is the fullness of him who fills everything in every way? This vision of what would it look like for the goodness of God to literally touch everything in our space, in our culture, in our domain of reality, in our world today. So what is our local language to kind of describe that, right? And so up on the screen, this is kind of how we would express this idea of saturation and the goodness of God in our local community. And it's this, it's that we seek to continually create opportunities with every person in our everyday to experience Jesus through a powerful, creative, and compassionate demonstration and declaration of his good news. I'm going to read that again. We seek to continually create opportunities with every person in our everyday to experience Jesus through a powerful, creative, and compassionate demonstration and declaration of his good news. When Jesus' rule and reign shows up in our world and begins to overlap and interfere with the world that we live in, the goodness of God begins to emerge. We begin to live into this reality of heaven even today, which we've been looking at as we've been studying even through the book of Acts as of recent. But I love this because this is our spiritual birthright. This is everybody participating in this vision that Jesus sees. So no matter what our life context looks like, no matter how boring or like mundane or whatever it is, whatever our day-to-day is, whatever our life's context is, God would say there is purpose in that, in the everyday. There is purpose in why God has positioned you in where you spend your life's days, right? And I oftentimes like to think of it as the church not being a spiritual escape, right, away from the everyday. Sometimes we're like, well, I got to get away from my week so I can get to church on Sunday. We view church as a destination. But this isn't the way that the vision of Jesus views it. It actually views what does the church look like saturated in every domain of society, right? So rather than the church being this escape away from our everyday life, it's actually a spiritual equiper into our everyday life, where it brings purpose into our day-to-day, brings purpose to the people we interact with every day. It brings purpose to every human being living in today. And I think a more simplified language to just express that vision in our own language is every person in our everyday. Every person in our everyday. This is what God's vision is all about. It's about every person in our everyday. What does it mean to embody spirituality in our everyday life? So for Team Sunday, this is our moment of the year where we just come back to and we go, how are we doing, right? How are we going to measure? How are we going to create a scorecard to make sure like we're moving towards that vision together as one local church? Oftentimes when it comes to measurements, like measurements can sometimes be crass, but I love the idea of like what we count actually counts. What we measure, it matters. It reveals like what are we paying attention to in the values of our local church as we move towards that grand vision. So we're going to really quickly up on the screen, I'm going to give us an overview of like, here's where our current scorecard is. And this is adapted, this has changed. I think we're getting better at understanding like how do we measure the things that really matter in our community. And this is what we're going to be walking through today just to see how we're moving towards that grand vision of Jesus. And it's really measurements of mutuality, 4 M's, right? Measurements of mutuality. Are we meeting together? Measurements of mission. Are we making disciples? Measurements of ministry. Are we mobilizing laborers? And measurements of money. Are we maintaining the vision? And here's an interesting thought. Oftentimes we are so comparative in our culture. We do this with ourselves all the time. We compare ourselves to other people that are completely divorced from our unique context that is our life. And when we compare, it kills the uniqueness of what God has put in us. I remember I had this breakthrough moment with my therapist several months ago where he was literally like, hey, stop measuring yourself against other people and measure yourself against yourself. How are you doing? Are you growing? And I think in any healthy measurement, that's what we need to do as a local church. We can compare ourselves ourselves to any local church and easily go, well, we're not that or we're not this. But if that takes us away from the uniqueness of what God is doing here. So as we build these year-to-year measurements, we go, hey, let's compare ourselves year to year and see, man, how are we doing year over year? Let's compare ourselves against ourselves and see if we as a local community are moving in the right direction towards the vision of Jesus. So let's begin as we kick this off with that first one, which is measurements of mutuality, which asks this question, are we meeting together? Which is based really out of John 13, which I love John 13. It really simplifies what our mission is, what the great commandment is of God, where he says, love one another. As I have loved you, love one another. And then he says this, he says, by the way that you love one another, people will actually know whether you are my follower or not. They will know whether you are my disciple, right? So it's this idea that like we're supposed to love each other internally, but a byproduct when we do that really well, externally, it catalyzes joy. It catalyzes more people being a part of this community. It catalyzes what we do internally, catalyzes something externally. I love that. So we did a lot together. There's a picture on the screen that'll kind of show different ways that we engage as a church family. We met together. We had a lot of fun together, a lot of joy. Shout out to all of us engaged in these different forms of community that included our Easter gathering, Bubbles booth at the Burbank Arts Festival, our Sunday suppers, which is a new thing that we started on Sunday afternoons just to gather around meals together, our Thanksgiving dinner, our youth summer camp, child dedications. There was like so many amazing opportunities where the value of like as a church, man, we need to love one another. We need to gather together. We need to meet together. A good year-over-year stat, I know Sunday gatherings, like who's here on a Sunday, that's one of many measurements that we pay attention to, so we don't want to elevate that as the most important, but I will say that our average attendance on a Sunday rose 3%, so we had about 105 on average here on a Sunday, compared to the past 2 years. We averaged 102 exactly for 2 years, so we're pushing up in the right direction. More people gathered on Sunday year over year, which is a good thing just to pay attention to. So when it comes to gathering together, I think it's good for us to also, in each of these, go, okay, where are we going together? And then what's a good next step for anybody concerning these measurements? So really on this next piece, where we're going in 2025 is we have Easter on April 20th. And one of my goals is that we just be Easter ready. We make sure we have the systems in place that really love on any new guests or people that are getting connected into MCC for the first time. And Easter will be a kind of a deadline to continue to practice those systems and make sure we're ready, just because we always see an influx of new guests gathering with us on Easter Sunday. So we want to be Easter Sunday. That's one of the big things gathering together. We're looking forward to this massive moment on the calendar. And then next step for mutuality is invite somebody to join you for Easter Sunday this year as we gather. That's a great next step, is to bring somebody along with you as we gather together as a church this upcoming Easter Sunday. So measurements of mutuality. Really thankful for that and looking forward to where we're going as a church together moving forward. Okay, the second piece that I want to dive into is measurements of mission. And really the question here is, are we making disciples? And this comes out of Matthew 28. And we know this, that disciple making or making disciples is the mission, the key mission of the church that Jesus commissioned his earliest followers to do. So we always say this, like Ford makes trucks, In-N-Out makes hamburgers, the church makes disciples, right? So we want to pay attention in some of the metrics when it comes to disciple making. So a few little stats here that I think help us understand where some of this is at, where it's going. We had 8 people that filled out and checked the box, as many of you know, on the Connect card. It said yes to Jesus this year. Last year, only 3 people did that, so we're talking about a 2.5 times increase, which is a good metric to pay attention to. One of another key metrics when it comes to disciple making is water baptism. So we had 8 people water baptized last year, 7 the year before, so a little bit of an increase in that. One of those was our son Luca, our 10-year-old Luca, which we're still so excited. That made the year for me in terms of that metric. And then lastly, our average weekly life group attendance, which is the space where we do a lot of the disciple-making work, that average weekly attendance rose from 43 to 46 year over year. So a little bit of a push in that area as well, which is good. These are good things and good metrics to know year over year we're moving in the right direction. And really, when we see, back on the life group piece, is when we see Jesus do disciple-making, He is not doing it with the crowds. He's never doing it in the big space. 90%, scholars say, 90% of Jesus' time where he did life on life and spiritual work with people was this group of 12 people, which is a smaller group that he spent the majority of his time on earth with. So when we see the methods of Jesus, not just the message of Jesus, the methods of Jesus shows and models that disciple making is always happening in these smaller pockets. There's a limit to what we can, so to speak, do on Sunday. So we're always encouraging, hey, what does it mean to grow out community in spaces that exist even outside of our Sunday gathering space when we're all together? So that kind of influences where are we going for 2025? And what's a good next step? So for 2025, along those lines is we want to invest more energy into equipping under this idea that we believe circles are always going to be greater than rows when it comes to transformation and spiritual transformation and doing life. So we want to make sure that this year, there's more energy dedicated into those spaces. There's more energy dedicated into what are our life groups and how do they develop and how do they expand. And then a great next step for this is obviously join a life group if you're not already part of one. We talked about the roster earlier. You can pick a roster up in our lobby. You can go to our website, MediaCityChurch.com. There's a little tab there with our life group roster. Just encourage you, a great next step if you're not a part of a life group, get into one and make sure you take that next step seriously, because we believe that's where a lot of the equipping and the life and the disciple making happens as we continue. All right, that's mission, measurements of mission. So we got two more left we're going to go over before we conclude here this morning. And the next one is measurements of ministry. Measurements of ministry. And the question here is, are we mobilizing laborers? Are we mobilizing laborers? And this comes out of Luke chapter 10, when Jesus declares the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. So he encourages his followers to pray for laborers of the harvest. There's a supernatural interaction of making sure that, hey, there's a lot going on, there's great things going on, but where there is a lack oftentimes is, are there those laboring? Are there laborers present, right? And really, the question we're asking here is, are we serving people? Because ministry is a very churchy word that just simply means serving others. So what it means. So how do we have metrics to just go like, are we serving people? And is that multiplying? Are we leaning into that grand vision that Jesus has? And so a few kind of ministry stats, and a lot of these are kind of new. There's a little bit of a hybrid that we're beginning to pay attention to. One in particular, we have a calling assessment called GPS that we put a lot of energy into last year. But it's a new tool. I believe one of the things the church is responsible for is helping people develop their calling and going like, man, what am I called to do? What gives me purpose? What has God uniquely designed in me? And so we have this tool, Gifts, Passion, Story, GPS, that we've been using, and we have a database with our church, and you can fill out the thing. The problem is we've realized that it takes a long time to fill this thing out. So we're experimenting and trying to find better tools. But even in the midst of that, without a big push this year intentionally, we had two people that engaged with that as a tool, which I think is one of these metrics that we want to pay attention to, is like, how are we helping people develop those good works and deeds? And how are we serving people to just have an imagination for like, what is that unique calling that God has placed in me that he's placed in nobody else? Our ministry leadership roster is at about 27. So like I said, that's a new measurement. We want a year over year, like, what does it look like? How many people are on our leadership roster that we can continue to invite into that process and continue to multiply ministry from? And then the last piece here is direct local church partnerships. We have always historically, as a church, been a church planting church. Many of you guys know that we helped plant Unique Life Church in Highland Park over a year ago. This year, we've opened our space to host more churches, two in particular that we're excited about. Many of you know that we have been hosting a Ghanaian church on Sunday afternoons that meets in this sanctuary in their congregation, a way to invest in this congregation as they continue to do ministry through their local church. And then actually we had a smaller congregation of Roma gypsies that met here on Thursday evenings that now have found Sunday space and have recently transitioned from their Thursday space into a Sunday space into a different facility, just because we didn't have the capacity to host them. So those are two main local church partnerships that we've been using even our space to help make sure that ministry is multiplied and supported through our local church congregation this year that we're excited about. Another thing we're excited about is we have just recently, starting this year, invited a small Armenian congregation on Sunday afternoons as well. So we're excited about the new partnerships that are existing as we continue to support more ministries where we just admit, as one local church, we obviously can't do the vision of Jesus on our own. It requires us to be interdependent and seeking the same things together. So really excited about that. So hey, where are we going in 2025 in terms of ministry on that one? And really, we really want to equip and expand ministry beyond the building. So what does that look like? And I oftentimes say, like, the old bias in churches oftentimes, we can do it, you can help. Where it's like, well, like whoever the paid people are at the church, they're going to do all the ministry and then invite everybody into these programs where we're going to like have fun doing ministry together. And our new bias, and this is language that we've been using for a couple years now, is rather than we can do it, you can help, our bias is, no, we believe with the vision of God is you can do it, and how do we help you? So the way that we govern and organize our church is going, hey, you are the expert of your own life. There's a unique ministry each and every one of us has to play a part in. So how do we as the church organize things around more ministry happening, not through programs that we put on a calendar, but through the daily activities in our everyday where unique ministries blossom, where rather it doesn't force people to be the missionaries to come to us on a Sunday, but where we own our missionary identity and we exist in the places where God has already placed us with so much purpose and so much power. Amen? So that's where we're going. We want to equip and continue to expand that with that mindset. And then a great next step for ministry is really just cultivating a serving spirit. You got to start somewhere. So one of the ways that we encourage people to start serving and building that kind of spirit of serving and that muscle of helping and serving others is starting on a serve team on Sundays. We have tons of roles that we need help with always, just to welcome people on a Sunday morning, whether it's our kids ministry, whether it's our first team, whether it's youth, whatever. Like, we always have open spaces for people to get involved so that we can just serve people better on Sunday. So just encourage you as a next step, you're not a part of a serve team, it's a great place to start where you build out that serving spirit. And yeah, how many of you guys know that doesn't always have to just exist on Sunday? Our hope is that serving spirit would multiply outside the walls of the church building. But if you haven't started or you're interested in building that muscle, Sunday mornings and joining a serve team is a great start. So you can find that on our website. There's a little connect drop down. You click serve and sign up for a team. All the teams are listed there, and we just want to partner with you as you build that muscle of serving and as we expand ministry together as a church. And then lastly, where we're going to kind of land this morning in our last measurement is a measurement of money. Are we maintaining the vision? And really the heart of this comes out of where Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So really the question for us is, how are we as people investing? Are we investing eternally? Are we investing our money just temporarily? And obviously, all of us have to invest temporally in the things that are in front of us, the tangible responsibilities we have. But I love how Jesus presses that question of the heart of going like, where is our heart? Where that our treasure is going to lie in those places. So are we people that are building the muscle of investing in the vision of God, investing in the way that we're organizing as a local church to see the mission and the vision of God continue? One of the things that's been really convicting, I think, in my mindset as of late is just the reminder that every local church has a timeline. A lot of scholars point back to maybe one or two churches that were first planted that still exist to this day. And there's a huge argument, which informs us throughout church history, chances are a local church in its life cycle will eventually die. But what doesn't die is the mission of God. The mission and vision of God always outlives any one local church or community of local churches, right? And so that reinforces us. Are we thinking small in just the context of our local church? Are we thinking about the mission and the vision of God multiplying throughout church history that always outlives any one local church? Are we thinking big picture? Are we thinking in that eternal perspective? Or oftentimes are we thinking very short-sighted, just temporally? And so for us, we think about the same way with money and how we're engaging money and using money and utilizing money. Just for a little bit of an inside look, we do have what we call a church council that meets monthly that helps steward the finances of the church together. So up on the screen, we have the current members of our church council. Look at those amazing and beautiful people up there. So shout out, we got Abby Horbachewski, who's new to our council. She's been a faithful member of our church for really over more than a decade. So she is, if you've been around here, you probably know Abby. Jonathan Adamchewski is a part of our teaching team. Jay Rodriguez, a safety team leader and life group leader, and then Robin Smith, who's also newer to our council, who's on the prayer team and has hosted some of our Sunday suppers. So these are people, I'm the chairperson of the council, so me alongside these four people, we meet monthly and we work through the finances of the church and make sure we're making good stewardship decisions, making sure we're making the adjustments that we need to make to steward very, very well. Now, we have been in a roller coaster of a situation with our finances over the past several years since Callie and I have been installed as your co-lead pastors. So we're going to give you a little bit of an inside look on this past year, what it looked like, some of the challenges we're facing, and how we're going to be moving forward. So let's get it up on the screen here. We're going to break this down. So let's deal with the left side of this past year. So as a council last year, we created a budget of $500,000, which was 25% less than our income of last year. So as good stewards, we budgeted a budget, said a realistic budget feels like it will be $500,000 based on the income that we had last year. So we cut 25% and said we're going to cut, we're going to spend less, we're going to create a budget. The problem is that our income was only $376,000, which was 56% less than the income last year. This is one of the reasons your pastor is in therapy. I'm just going to be honest with you. Like talk to any business owner and talk about a 56% shift, and that is unbelievably difficult, unbelievably stressful. I'm serious when I say that this has taken a toll on our family and our personal life. I just want you to know that. This hasn't been fun. This has been really, really difficult. This has caused Callie and I to have to question a lot of different things in our life and reassess, because there's been questions of sustainability. There's been deep and hard questions, and the sacrifices you make to make sure that we're going to make it and we're going to financially sustain this thing. And this is I'm talking, this is a pastoral transition. 5 years it takes. We are in year like a little over 3, about heading into 4. This is the moment. Like, this is the difficult moment of any pastoral transition where you kind of hit this low point, right? But we're going to build forward. And I will say this is where I'm very, very proud in the midst of the chaos, right? We spent less than our budget, right? So we spent 22% less than we did the year before, and we also cut about 30 grand under our proposed budget as we made adjustments along the way. And we have about $108,000 in the bank, which is 47% less than last year. So we've still got some good assets to work with, but we need to continue to be vigilant in stewarding and making the adjustments that are needed in order to make sure we are financially viable moving forward. Now, here's some interesting stats. The number of givers in 2024 was 98. 98 people, individuals or family units, gave to Media City Church, which is down a little bit. That's down 3% than last year over year. But I will say this, the number of new givers in 2024, we had 32, which was a 128% increase. Once again, that's a church transition stat in a nutshell right there, right? So we have a little bit less givers, but we have an influx of new givers as new people in our community represented are beginning to give. Now, right side kind of breaks down where we spent less and how we cut. So our extension tithe, we as a church, we tithe, we give 10% of our income. Me personally, and many in our church, give 10% of our income. That represents this biblical number of 10. That's encouraged throughout the biblical narrative as a model. It doesn't have to be a rule. I always believe that the tithe is kind of like the floor rather than the ceiling, since Jesus gave everything. So myself, and I know many in our church community, we tithe out of our income and give it to the church, support the mission and the vision of Jesus. But we as a local church, we take 10% and then we give to our denomination, who helps support and create structure for more churches like ours. So that gives you a picture of, if you times that number by 10, there was the income, the generosity supported by our church, which is about $259,000. Now, that was down a little bit, but not by much. about 1.6%. So that feels pretty darn stable when it comes to our generosity. And with those 2024 new giver numbers, I think we are headed in the right direction, right? Now, we cut about 25% from our personnel budget. So that's the people that are on our team and on our staff. We've had to cut drastically. And that's one of the areas where we cut the most. Ministry and missions, we spent about 11% less. Benevolence, we cut that pretty drastically in what we were able to do in terms of benevolence and helping others. And then leadership development, about 23% spent less. And then operations and facilities, one of the big things was like, how do we make sure we're being good stewards of our space and being good stewards of what we need to upkeep when it comes to our facility. We have a massive facility and multiple properties other than this address that we help steward and oversee. And so we cut there. So we're headed in the right direction. And we're going to continue to head in the right direction when it comes to our economics. So where are we going with money? Let's address that now in terms of where we're going with money in 2025. And the big motto will be do more with less. How do we do more with less money, right? Our magic number for our budget this year is $375,000. So we're cutting $125,000. That is another massive sacrifice and the reality of where we are at as a church. And we're going to do what we need to do to make sure we continue to steward this thing forward, going in the right direction. So that's cutting $95,000 out of our spending, which, as you can imagine, is no small task. But even as we talk about multiplying ministry, we are a church planting church in our history, and we have a vision to continue to plant churches. And so here's what I know, even looking at our budget. Let's look at our budget for this next year to assume that, well, we want to plant churches like ours. Well, that means that you have to have $375,000 annual budget to plant a church. So we know that, yes, we will probably plant more churches that have traditional style budgets like ours, that look like ours. That's a traditional view of church planting. Great. If that happens, we want to invest in that. God bless you. But we also realize that church planting doesn't need to be that expensive, especially when we're talking about locations, real estate in LA. How do you plant churches when it comes to real estate? Well, the question becomes, do you need real estate, or what does real estate look like? So we as a church are always thinking, how do we allow the mission and the vision of Jesus continue? And how do we as a church have a vision for church planting today in Los Angeles, where we continue to be a church planting church, where it doesn't require a church to have a several $100,000 budget? That's a big part of our strategy of going like, what does it look like to plant churches for less money? We need to be thinking about that. We need to have a vision for that. And then an obvious next step for money is give. And thank you for those who have been so generous over these past several years that have helped kind of carry us through, and just encourage you. Like another opportunity, it's like, man, if you've been kind of on the fence about giving, just encourage you to give, to trust. You can give on our website, MediaCityChurch.com/give, and this is where our annual report is. So you can look at our annual report there as well. But also on that page, there's what we call our 3-month generosity challenge, which we always talk about, because once again, like any habit, like giving is also really, really difficult to build that muscle. It doesn't happen overnight. I don't believe it's like an easy thing. And so we have a challenge which is essentially like a money back guarantee, which is like, hey, try this for 3 months. And if you're like, things are tight or whatever, I need my money back, hey, money back guarantee. We will do it. Our big thing is like helping us build the culture of generosity together as a church. And if we do that, if we lean into that, we're going to be fine. I know that. And that's partnered with God's faithfulness along the way, and we will continue to adjust in the ways that we need to adjust as we continue moving forward. I'm going to put that vision statement up the screen as we conclude and wind it down this morning. It says this: we seek to continually create opportunities with every person in our everyday to experience Jesus through a powerful, creative, and compassionate demonstration and declaration of his good news. Every person in our everyday. That's what we're doing together. That's what we're moving towards together. That's what we're on fire for as we move together and saying, how do we fund that? How do we think about this? How do we measure? How do we encourage? Where do we spend our energy? That's how we're moving forward together. That's where we're going to continue to go. We're better together. And by stepping up, serving, staying faithful, we're going to keep moving forward toward that vision that Jesus sets out for us and how we uniquely define it as our amazing local church. What an honor it is to be a part of this church family. So many amazing moments and memories that have happened this year. It's been difficult. It's had challenges. But here's what I know. God shapes us more in the valleys than he does on the mountaintops. I'm getting in shape right now. I know I am. But I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful that we as a church community get to do that in this season and continue to move forward together. God's going to continue to be faithful, just like he's been for this local church nearly 100 years. We have outlived the average local church's lifespan more than 2 times at this point. We're going to keep seeing that go. We're going to keep seeing God be faithful. We're going to keep seeing, even so, the mission and vision of God outlive even this church if we make the right investments towards the things that he's placed in front of us and the grand vision that he's inviting us into. It's a team effort. We're going to keep doing it together. Amen? All right. I'm going to pray us into a moment of reflection like we always do. And we always ask a couple questions in this moment of reflection. What do you feel the Holy Spirit is speaking to you today during the message? A lot of content, a lot of good things. And then lastly, that second question, what are you going to do about it? And oftentimes in my journal, I create this as an I will statement. Here's how I'm going to be obedient to the things I feel like God is speaking to me. So let's collectively create a moment together and respond to the Lord. And I'm going to pray us into that moment as we spend a few minutes just reflecting. So Lord Jesus, we're thankful for your faithfulness. God, we're thankful that you continue to carry us through.